In the interview, I wanted to talk about courage for the Courage series. I'm going to talk about what courage means to you, challenges you had historically in acting courageously, kind of the turning point for you to, acting or behaving in a more courageous way, and how it translated to other areas in your life. So I guess what was the setting where, courage was challenging for you? Kind of where did that begin, where you felt like it was a challenge?
Mostly when I became a mom, I suddenly felt very scared of a lot of things. I think that was when, even though I wasn't diagnosed, my OCD really peaked. I had a lot of things to be scared of all of a sudden, being a parent. Maybe a little bit before that, when I moved out on my own, went to college, any situation that introduced new variables into my life is when I started having a lot of fear. So those two things probably are the most significant, just being on my own and then having to take care of little people.
So kind of the big transitions.
Yeah.
Okay. So before living on your own, would you say you saw yourself as a courageous person, or you saw yourself, how did you view yourself in that way?
I think I always have viewed myself as a pretty courageous person. When I was a teenager, I did gymnastics. I was really outgoing. Some of those things, interestingly, I think were because of OCD. I wanted to be seen as a person who would do anything and go anywhere and try anything new.
Up for anything.
And because I have a lot of social things where I want people to view me as a person who's likable and exciting to be around.
Here, yeah.
It made me do a lot of things that I probably wouldn't have done if that wasn't something that I had compulsions about. I compulsively was outgoing because I wanted to be seen.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
I went against sometimes what I actually wanted to be doing so I could be seen a certain way. So I think I was pretty courageous in that I just was kind of doing all these outgoing, adventurous things, but maybe not courageous because I wasn't being true to myself.
That's a really interesting point, how you could potentially do scary things or daring things, but in a way it's an avoidance of, so I guess when I think about courage, I think about, there is something that you genuinely want to do that's meaningful and important to you, and it's scary. And courage, I find, is kind of just doing it anyway, right?
When you first asked it, I was thinking of, I guess, stereotypical courage. Are you being but if you really dive deep, I actually wasn't being courageous because I wasn't doing what I wanted. I was afraid to be that person. So
right, it's almost like when you have peer pressure and everyone's calling you a chicken to do something, right? So I think the brave thing could be you could call me a chicken, but I'm just not gonna do it.
I didn't expect to be unpacking something like that in this. That's a perspective I hadn't thought of before. So
that's interesting. Cool. Anything pop out in your mind as something you did that was for the sake of coming off as the life of the party, or likable, but you really didn't want to do?
Yeah, I jumped off of a bridge when I was in high school. I went with people I knew I shouldn't be doing it. I was with some people I really wanted to kind of be friends with, and it was if everyone's jumping off a cliff, would you do it? And I did that, and it was so dangerous. It was into a river no one should be in. And so that's a great example. I literally jumped off of a bridge.
Okay.
And be this person that I wasn't.
Were you okay after?
Yes.
I guess you had great, from your gymnastics background, you knew how to just base dive.
Yeah, I was good. But that's one big example is now I think back on that, and that's something I would never do now because that doesn't go along with who I am at all. I don't like jumping off of anything.
Yeah,
So
that's
yeah.
a good thing. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, very cool. As far as okay, and even though it seemed to be like you said, like that compulsive need to be liked and seen as a courageous one, um, you viewed yourself at that point as courageous, right? It sounds like.
I did. Yeah.
Hmm.
I didn't know what I know now. So in my
Yeah.
mind, it was just like, yeah, I'm doing things I don't want to do because they're cool and they're fun, they're exciting. And I didn't know that I wasn't being true to myself. I thought I was just trying to make myself into like the
Uh-huh.
person that I should be, I guess, if that makes sense.
Interesting. Yeah, totally. And when did you kind of have that? Okay, so you said when you went off to college, that was like when things got a little frightening for you, or you started to feel like
Yeah.
more cagey? Like, tell me about that.
I think that it just was realizing you're in a new environment around new people, and I didn't have my solid friendships anymore. And that's when I was realizing that I really had to figure out who I am and like, why am I doing these things? Who do I want to be around? And so I felt kind of like, I don't know what's going on. Like, who am I really? And
Mm-hmm.
why am I doing all these things that go against what I want to be doing? But then I'm trying to think of how to explain what I'm
Yeah.
thinking.
Yeah.
That's just when I started having a lot of, I think, anxieties and fears of figuring out like, what do you want to do with your life? What kind of person are you really? Are you going to make the right decisions? That was my biggest thing, is worrying about making the wrong choice. Because all of a sudden
Okay.
you're deciding what you're going to do with the rest of your life. And what if you choose the wrong thing?
Yeah.
Ironically, the degree that I got is not something that I want to be doing
I
anymore.
know.
I really did make a decision that now seems wrong. And those were my biggest fears, is what if you make the wrong decision in
Wow. Yeah.
socially and educationally, and who you're hanging out with and where you're living, and are you going to the right college, just all of that stuff.
Yeah. Where did you grow up?
I grew up in Utah.
In
So
Utah. Very
yeah,
cool. And in a Norwegian family?
no.
Okay.
My dad lived in Norway for 2 years.
Yeah.
And he met someone named Kjersti. He was like on a mission for our church. And so there's no Norwegians in my family. Like, I just have the name. So
Okay.
yeah.
Cool. Very cool. And okay, so you grew up in Utah. How did you like it?
Oh, I loved it. I
You
love
love
it.
Utah?
But I love it here because it doesn't snow all the time.
Okay. That that makes sense.
It was
And
so
yeah, so what did you I tend to just jump around randomly. So that's
fun.
that's the way my mind works. Okay, interesting. And what did you want to do as a kid? Like, do you have like memories of what you wanted to do?
It's funny because I remember telling people that I wanted to be a heart surgeon.
Mm-hmm.
And when I went to college, I didn't really know what to be. People always told me I was good at teaching, so that's what I went into.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that I just chose that because I needed to do something. I don't think I really like knew what I wanted to be. So I had to choose something. There was that pressure to choose something. You have to decide
Right.
what I chose.
Yeah, that's interesting because it's almost like we have this belief that the more we ruminate about a particular decision, it'll get us to make the right one.
Yeah.
And I don't know, sometimes it does get us to think a lot about it and it is successful, and sometimes it's not, right? It's kind of hard to
Yeah.
know.
And I spent time before that decision and after, and even now, I don't know, it's been 10 years since I graduated and I still ruminate about it. What if I would have done something different? Just the
Mm-hmm.
what if. That's
Yeah.
OCD brain, but what if I would have done different?
Yeah. So you ended up going into studying education? Like, was your degree?
Yeah.
Okay. And where was college for you?
It was at UVU. It's near BYU in Provo.
Okay, so you stayed in Utah for like far away from home?
Like an hour.
An hour from home. Okay. And then studied education. It wasn't easy to get to that decision. Ultimately, you thought it was the wrong decision for you?
No, it was just a fine decision. What I really wanted to do was go into dance, like
Mm.
be a dance teacher or some sort of like, I was a gymnast, so athletic training, something like that.
Mm-hmm.
But I do think that there were different things related to my OCD that just held me back from that. Like you, you can't do, I have a lot of thoughts of you can't do this, you won't be successful, you can't memorize things, you can't like go into a medical field
Mm.
or even like I made this into this great dance program and then I would have had to take out a student loan. So I was like, I can't do that. Can't take out a student loan. I'm not going to make that decision. So a lot of my choices were fear-based avoidance decisions that led me to going into education, which wasn't ever part of my plan.
Right. So you had like a whole chorus of like possible mistakes that you could make, and it was a reason not to try things because you might make a mistake.
Yeah.
Right. And it like kind of led you to like maybe going a more safe, well tread path versus just like, oh, I'm going to teach dance, right? Which is like probably, there's not as many successful dance teachers and there's probably more successful teachers, right?
Exactly.
So, okay, interesting. And what do you do now? Like, what did you end up doing?
Now I have 4 kids. So
Mm-hmm.
currently I am home with them, just kind of running the show.
Awesome.
And it's a fun place to be for me because now I know a lot of what held me back in the past. And I feel like I'm kind of starting fresh. The sky's the limit of what I can do going forward. I'm trying to figure out what I want to do. And I have this new attitude of, well, yeah, I have OCD. Yes, I'm going to have those thoughts. But now I know I can just push through them and still work towards something that actually matters to me. So it's exciting.
That's so cool. How old are your kids? Like, what age ranges?
11 is my oldest. He's the one that also has OCD. And then I have a 2-year-old. So between 11
Okay.
and 2.
Okay. I'm in the 7 to 2 range. 2-year-olds are so funny.
Oh my goodness.
They like they're like really just starting to become like a person. It's just
Yeah,
so funny.
it's the
Yeah.
fun stage. It's so fun. It's nice to have
Yeah.
a 2-year-old with my 11-year-old because we're getting into like the preteen. But then I have my funny 2-year-old to like help me
Mm-hmm.
out when things are hard. So
Yeah. Yeah, that's really cool. So in terms of how did you come to that decision of being a stay-at-home parent? Like, what was the process? What was the challenges involved?
it kind of happened a little bit naturally because when my husband graduated, he got a job as a consultant.
Mm-hmm.
So it was either we stay and he moves around and just visits us every 2 weeks, or we go with him. So
Right.
we had a 1-year-old, and I decided, well, we'll just come with you. And
Right.
we did that for 3 years.
I would have chosen that too.
And
I,
then,
I
yeah,
don't like the visiting spouse
yeah,
idea.
neither do I. And it was
Yeah.
fun. We got to live in the Midwest and in Kansas City and um, Ohio. So that it just kind of happened organically, and then I just kept staying at home with them. So
Yeah. Did the fear of mistakes, did that translate into like when it came to like relationships and deciding on who to settle down with?
I didn't have a lot of that at the time. Like I was pretty sure about my husband. I do have things pop up like, well, what if he decides I wasn't the right person to marry? Like now we have 4 kids. And so I do now my OCD dabbles a little bit in
Yeah.
relationship with OCD, but not too much. Like it never
Right.
has been a really prominent thing.
OCD could be like that, where it's like, why don't we try out this OCD today?
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? Like, aren't toilets gross? Like, like it'll just be creative
Yes.
sometimes. It'll give you like a new thing to think about.
Yeah.
Okay. So you had that like moving around period of your life? Where is your husband still a consultant?
He's not. He
Mm-hmm.
he works near here, and he just has a solid job, which is nice. We stopped that when we only had 2 kids. So we decided it would be too much once school started to keep moving around every 6 months we would move. So
Okay. All right. Interesting. Okay, because like there was like a stint that you were doing, and then
yeah,
you would. Interesting.
go to a factory and like help them with a problem, and then go to the next one and kind of move.
Okay, and then you decided like he would work and you would stay at home with the kids, and you've been liking that?
Yeah, I really like it. It's really
All
fun.
right, wonderful. And you mentioned like you have okay, so like in terms of college, there was this like fear of making the wrong mistake or like taking the wrong direction. And then like what other challenges like in this next part of your life where you felt like fears kept creeping in?
As a parent,
Yeah, as a parent. Yeah.
that's like the big one for me. I have a lot of fears of us getting sick, which is funny because it's not funny, but it's not because I'm that worried about being sick. It's that there's a lot of us. There's 6 of us. So if someone gets sick, it derails us for like a good month. Like it's a lot.
Right,
so,
right. It's like a domino effect.
Yeah. So I just feel the need to keep everyone healthy because then we can function as usual. So that was a lot of contamination, OCD, and then just a lot. There was this experience we had when my son was 9 days old where he stopped breathing while he was sleeping. And so an ambulance had to come. He had aspirated. It was very scary. So after that, I started having so many fears of just my kids, like even making it through the night. Are they going to die in the night? So I would go feel them to make sure they were.
Sorry about that.
You're okay. I would go and feel their chests throughout the night, to make sure they were breathing, and that continued all the way until my diagnosis. I couldn't feel their chest, I would make them move. Like I would tickle their foot.
Okay.
Or I would wake them up just to make sure they were alive before I could go to bed. So that was
well, that had such like a clear origin, like that really that makes sense.
Yeah. So that was for 9 years. I would wake them every night before I went to bed, or at least feel them. Couldn't feel them, I would wake them up.
Were they ever like, "Hey, mom, give it a rest," or did they?
They would just, look at me confused, like, "What are you doing?" And I would just say, I'm just checking on you. They thought it was normal for their parent to wake them up every single day. But
like they would go to their friends, like, "Yeah, your mom also checks if you're breathing, right?"
Right.
They're like, "You're playing a." Yeah.
When I started my treatment, that was something one of the biggest ones I worked through was I started with only checking them like every other night, and then only looking at them, and then only like cracking the door open. And like, so I had to do all these baby step exposures, and now I don't ever check on them. Sometimes I'm like, I'm going to open the door, but I just don't. I walk past and I go to bed. Yeah. But that was a really hard one.
And so that's like such a picture of courage, right? Because it sounds like you don't want to do that checking. It's not necessary. You don't want to disturb their sleep or do that. And especially if your kid's like 11 already.
Exactly.
Right? You're probably not into that. So you're like kind of choosing, the scary path, which is like, I don't know what's going on.
Yeah.
Right. Exactly. And I'm going to trust that it's fine. And even though I don't have that confirmation, I'm just going to do that. That's such really a beautiful picture of courage.
Yeah. And to be okay with maybe it's not fine. Like maybe in the morning, I'll find out that one of them died in their sleep.
Mm-hmm.
But I'll just have to wait until morning to know that. And so when I had reached out to you, that's why I was saying, I don't feel like I have these big, profound, courageous things, but I was writing stuff down. Like I have pages of things that I've been keeping track of Like, these are all the ways every day that I am showing courage that might
Yeah.
be big to other people, but for me, it's life-changing. And for my kids, they're not getting woken up every day anymore.
Yeah. And I think what's interesting is like when you were doing like the objectively courageous things, it was almost out of fear. And
Yeah.
when you're doing the things that people take for granted as easy, which is like just letting your kids get to sleep at night,
Yes.
like that was your courage. So it's so subjective in that way.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I love the way you put that. Like, my courage is things that other people take for granted that they don't even think about.
Right. And I also think though that it wasn't just that for you, because you mentioned like you show courage in being open about talking about mental health issues and
Yeah.
grassroots movements. And also you mentioned, just being open about it. So tell me about that process, like what it was like, the challenge of being open about it, and also, how you made that decision to be open about it.
Yeah. So the way I just kept feeling this pull, we had an experience when we thought something was going on with my son, and we had asked pediatricians about it and different things, and they had just said, oh, it must be anxiety. So we reached out to a therapist, and he said, I think he has OCD. And that was the fourth therapist I had ever talked to in my life, and the first one that ever said this could be OCD. I didn't know what OCD was. So just knowing that that one person made a difference made me want to start sharing, so that there could be more people out there who knew what OCD was. But I went through a lot of back and forth. Can I share this really vulnerable stuff about me that most people would be like, wow, like there's this story during COVID. I would put hand sanitizer on like 5 times in the car. Put it on, put it on, put it on. And one time I got in the car and I itched my nose and I hadn't put hand sanitizer on. I took hand sanitizer and I put it around where I had itched my nose.
You snorted it a little bit?
Like, I'm just going to clean. So how do you share that stuff with people and not have them say, wow, this girl's off her rocker,
Right.
And I worried, what if I try and get a job in the future and they see me sharing these stories and they're like, I just worried about all that. What are people going to think?
Right.
But then the thing that started mattering to me more is, who can I help? Who is out there putting hand sanitizer on their nostrils that's going to see this and say, oh my gosh, she does what I do, and she's doing better and I can do better. So that
was so I love how you phrase that. I just want to process it for a minute, because it's like you had like a clear fear story, which is like, I am, people, it's going to ruin my reputation. What are people going to think about me? Which also is something that you've been thinking about for a long time, from like, from youth, about like, how are people perceiving you, right? And then that was on your mind. And then you also had like the story of someone who does not know what's going on, but is putting, sanitizer on their nose and doesn't have. So in a way, like I find like you have, like, courage comes down to like this decision point, right? And you could continue moving on and not worrying about people's perception about you and whether or not whatever they think about you. Even that becomes uncomfortable, right? Because you start thinking about, like there's someone who really needs to hear my story. And, so I heard one therapist describe, like he was being interviewed as being someone who's like very brave. And he's like, I'm not so brave. I'm just more afraid of the alternative, of like what it would cost my soul for like not being open and truthful about it. So I thought that was such an interesting way to phrase it. And it's kind of like, you had this real value, but I think even within the value, you have this fear of, or you have like this, what would it mean if I just totally neglected that? And I think that's also hard, right? So it's like, almost, they say like, choose your heart. Are you gonna have the heart of like, people potentially thinking about something about you, or the heart of just like, foregoing foregoing that mission. And
Yeah.
that's really cool. So what
I
was like the opening moment for you where you made the decision to tell someone?
Well, I started with telling just my good friend. We go to we have hot tub night, and I was like, I'm just gonna tell her.
That sounds really fun. Yeah.
Right? It's like the best.
It's the best place to tell people stuff. Like,
Every
how
mom,
are they going to react in a hot tub?
every mom should find another mom friend, and they should have hot tub night because it's the best. And I just decided I'm just gonna tell her, and I did. And then she was like, oh, like she just accepted it. Like she was like, oh, okay, and now she knows if I text her, can you check if my garage is open? She'll ignore me because she knows that I'm asking her to engage in a compulsion because she knows some of my things. So she was a really great friend. And then I thought, okay, well, I told her, and that was so scary. And then I just came home and said, I need to think of an Instagram handle. I'm just going to start sharing my story. I did talk to Michelle about it a little bit. I said, how do you share your story? Like, what do you share? How much do you share? Like, this is like, should I share?
Right.
And so that was a good conversation. She just was like, share as much as you want and as much as you don't want. Like, you were the first person I've ever shared that I put sanitizer on my nostrils.
Right.
So I feel
like
like
therapists are different because like they heard everything already.
Yeah. As
Right.
time goes on, I'm like, okay, I can be more vulnerable as people are like, wow, that was great that you shared that. I feel more comfortable sharing more. But it was just this moment of I told someone, they acted like it was fine. And then I ended up telling another friend who actually now has a diagnosis.
Oh, it's like exactly what you envisioned.
Yeah.
Right?
And I thought, well, if that's all that happens is she got a diagnosis, then that's what I wanted. Like, I just wanted to help other people. I see the change in my life in only 3 years. I have so much more time. I'm not engaging in so many compulsions. I'm spending more time with my kids where I would have made them wait or entertain themselves because I'm Googling or checking or doing different things. Like, I think it's just, I see the value that I have had from recovery and I just want to help people. But also something you were saying is I have to make sure that I am finding a balance because I start to feel pressure. Oh, I'm not posting enough. I'm not sharing enough. What if I'm not doing enough? And so that's where I have to say, okay, well, this week I'm not going to share anything. And that's kind of an exposure because I'm like, well, I'm not sharing. What if now when I share, people don't see it because I don't know, there's like an algorithm or whatever that I don't understand. So it's this, I feel like OCD it just sneaks into everything, which is
and it's again like this example of the same behavior. Like 1 week could be a value-based courage behavior, and another week it could be, totally done out of fear of not doing enough, right? Like that's
exactly.
It's like you learn to surf like your motivations and your true desires, and almost like get in touch with yourself in the process of like, who am I and what do I want right now?
Yeah.
And I think that's like a helpful like tool to have that maybe some people won't have unless they kind of went through this, right? And I also heard in your discussion, in your telling that like that there's almost like this helpful incremental approach to courageous to being courageous, because it's like you didn't start by having this big like lecture to a whole crowd of strangers and friends, right? You just like told a friend in a hot tub, and that was like a little, like that was like a big thing. It was like the first thing, but it was kind of like in a very manageable, safe setting. And then from there, it seems like it went on from there. So it's cool how it's kind of incremental in that way.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, definitely baby steps. And just now that I know what I know about OCD, I really try and say, why am I making this decision? Am I making it out of fear and anxiety, or am I making it because I'm like, oh, I should share that. Like, that's really great. Instead of, oh, I need to post. I have to do this. I'm so worried if I don't, then so I really try and now, and why am I making this choice? Am I making it because of fear and anxiety, which is where a lot of my choices came from, or am I making it because that's what I want to do?
Mm,
And that
very cool.
all day long. I am.
What's your Instagram handle?
It's KJ OCD Recovery.
Okay. Oh, do you do like coaching also?
No.
Or okay.
Yeah. I spent so
Very
long
cool.
trying to think of a good one, and then I was like, I'm just gonna make one. People are so clever with their Instagram handles.
People are so what?
So clever. Like they think
I
of the
know. There's really also like some influencers are like so talented. I'm like, how are they just doing this? It's like so cool. Oh, that's really cool. And I also am hearing what you said, like kind of acting courageously comes with its own rewards. Like you kind of acted courageously and then you felt so good, like when you were able to help shed light on someone else's diagnosis. So it's like you make this difficult decision and you feel the fear and the what if. And it seems like it tends to come with like little, the universe patting you on the back, like that you did the right thing.
Yeah,
right?
a little bit. Yeah.
Yeah, that's so cool. So what other fun, courageous stuff do you point to as like part of the process of being more courageous?
I tried to think of some examples. Like it's really every day. I have contamination OCD. The stomach flu is like one of my greatest fears. Oh, I hate it so much. And so my husband, he works from home. We were supposed to have parent-teacher conference, and he said he wasn't feeling well. And I said, okay, you can join on your computer. I am going to join. We were in the same house. I was like, I'm going to join conferences from upstairs. And like, you
Right.
can stay in your little bubble. And I was trying to join. And I knew it was a compulsion. I knew, but I couldn't handle it. I couldn't handle it. And the iPad wasn't working and I couldn't log in. So at the last minute, I had to run down and sit next to him for the whole hour and a half of parent-teacher conference.
Yeah.
I almost was just going to text him and say, you're just going to have to join by yourself. I can't get it.
And you'll tell me how they're doing.
I'll log in as soon as I can, but I was just going to miss it.
Okay.
And so those are like the everyday things. Is I'm like, I need to put on my big girl pants and I'm just going to go in there and sit down and watch this conference next to him, even though he might be sick. When we were at the OCD conference, they do a road, you're probably familiar. It's a road to recovery walk with John Pearson. So my son wanted to do it. He's 11. He was like, I want to go. And I was like, okay. This will be fun. And as we were going, everyone was having what seemed like a great time. I was just derailing inside. We were licking dumpsters and we were kicking tires and we were yelling things. And as we're going, I'm just slowly like spiraling down more and more. My husband was like, are you okay? And I was like, I am not. And then we got to this point where we were supposed to touch the toilet and then they would put a Tic Tac in your hand and you would eat it. And I said, I can't. I'm not going to do it. And my son was like, I'll do it. And I thought, he has OCD and I do too. And I am his example. So I marched in the bathroom after him and I touched the toilet and I ate the Tic Tac. And then I just cried and cried and cried. And later my son talked to me and he said, Mom, that was really hard for you. And I said, yeah, it was really hard for me. But I feel like recently that was probably my most courageous moment is I was like, I need to touch this toilet because he's doing it. And I am expecting him to be brave and have courage and fight his own battle. And how can I not fight my own and show him that you can? So yeah, I was a mess. But then the next day I licked a shoe because I had momentum and I was like, I'm going to lick a shoe. Now I lick shopping cart handles and all sorts of things because I feel like once you have momentum after you've done an exposure, you just have to like keep
Keep
doing
it up. Yeah.
it.
So this is my new social work intern, Annie, and so she stopped by. She was in a little traffic, so you'll catch the tail end. We were just like talking about her journey of becoming someone who I find is very courageous, and also now does a lot of awareness spreading about OCD, and it's been really, really interesting. I picked up from what you just said. Oh, I was going to say, like, there's kind of like this theme of like the impact of parenting on both like getting anxious and also being brave, right? Because like kind of like the stakes just feel so much higher because you have this little person you love like a tremendous amount that you're
Yeah.
also responsible for. And you could like fill you with so much fear, but it's also like you want to make his life and his world like a better place, and
Yeah.
it like really could fill you with courage to like do whatever you need to do for them, so I find like it's interesting that it could be both a source of anxiety and also a source of courage, like a kid.
Exactly. Yeah. My things with my kids give me the most anxiety, but then as a parent, sometimes even before I had a diagnosis, like I would just have to do the things that I was feeling so worried about because you just have to as a
Right.
parent. You can't
Yeah.
not. You can't avoid everything because you do have to take care of your little people.
Yeah.
So yeah. And then after the conference, we had to make a goal. So my kids got tickets to this indoor, like McDonald's type tunnels and slides play place for Christmas a few years ago. And I had told them, I had convinced them that we didn't need to use them and we would kind of use the money to go out for ice cream or like different things because I just didn't feel like I could take them there because there's just so many germs. And so for 2 years, my poor kids, they didn't get to go to this place. And so at the conference, after I touched the toilet and the dumpster and licked a shoe, I said, I'm going to take them to this place. And so I let them redeem their Christmas gift 2 years later. And as we were crawling through all the tunnels, I was just touching the tunnel, licking my finger, touching the tunnel, licking my finger. So those are the little ways I feel like just that day-to-day stuff. That took a lot of courage for me to even take them into that building because I just knew there are germs here and
That's where they hang out.
And it was the week before school. So I said, they're going to get sick before school and they're not going to be able to go. So it was just this perfect moment to be like, I can be brave and not have my OCD negatively impact my kids.
Yeah. And were you able to have fun?
I did have fun. I had a
You
lot.
were able to have fun. It wasn't just survival mode.
It was good.
That's so great. I love that story. So it sounds like you had some really great experiences with like OCD therapists and also like therapists that you didn't feel like quite know how to help you.
Yeah.
So Annie just joined our practice. So like what advice would you give to a therapist on how to be the best OCD therapist?
Well, the biggest game changer for me was just the therapist knowing that OCD existed.
Okay. So know it exists. Let's end there.
So know it exists. That's number one. I saw 3 therapists who all diagnosed me with generalized anxiety disorder. And we did a lot of meditation and analyzing thoughts and proving them wrong and stuff like that before my diagnosis. So yeah, that would be number one, is knowing about it. And then number 2, I think is something that made a big difference for me with my therapist is she really got to know me. Like she didn't decide, oh, she has OCD, this is how she is, and we need to do things. She really dived deep into why I was having the different obsessions I was having. It wasn't surface level. she said, these things are happening. Like, you're worried about germs, but it's coming from a deeper place. So let's find that deeper place and attack that. And that's how you get better faster.
Oh, like a core fear, if you will?
Yeah. Yes.
Okay.
Core fear. Instead of just saying, okay, you're worried about your kid walking home from school, let's attack that. It's like, what are you really worried about for your kid? Like, let's unpack it on a deeper level. And that made a big difference for me. I feel like I was able to recover I'm still recovering, but I was able to overcome some things faster because she didn't stay on the surface, but we really got to a deeper level before I started exposures. She taught me so much OCD before we started exposures because she wanted me to know the why of what we were doing instead of just saying, oh, go do this really hard thing. First, I understood why I was doing it. And
right. So it wasn't like, so they knew OCD existed and they were very skilled in being able to understand you as a person and what was really underlying maybe the more superficial fears and using that to be very helpful is what it sounds like.
Yeah, exactly.
That's really cool. This was really fun. This was really inspiring and interesting. And you mentioned earlier, like this idea of like, you have this feeling like anything could be next, right? You're talking about like now you're home with the kids, but like anything's possible. I'm curious, like what you see in your future for yourself.
Well, I've just found a passion in this, in helping people with OCD and sharing my story. Sometimes I think about peer support, maybe something like that. I do want to just keep sharing with others as much as I can. Every now and then I tell my husband, oh, I feel like I could write a book because I have pages of stuff.
Right. I have a book in various papers. If I just put them together,
yes, if I could just compile everything, there is a story there that maybe people would find interesting. So yeah, something in the OCD world is what I really want to do now. And just
you think you'll be a therapist one day?
Would
you ever want to?
I think I really take on a lot of responsibility, or at least because of OCD, like I feel very responsible when things go wrong and a lot of guilt. Okay. So I think if I was a therapist, I would struggle because I would be taking on I don't know if that makes sense. I internalize decisions and choices and behaviors and like make them my own. But I do think in some way, like I said, maybe as a peer support specialist or something like that, I would like to be involved with helping people in their recovery.
You know Chrissy Hodges?
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah, so she's my friend and she does such great like peer support work.
Yeah. Yes, I love her. So something like that would be something I would love to do.
Very cool. Annie, do you have any questions that come to mind?
So since all of this is about courage, I was wondering, like, what was it like for you to go over that tipping point when you started with exposure prevention therapy, when you had to start, confronting the compulsions?
Yeah, it was hard at first. There were a lot of moments where I felt like maybe I can just not do this. Maybe I should just not do this. Like, what am I doing? There were lots of tears and lots of fear. My anxiety was higher than it had ever been. But then there were just then the moment would happen where the thing I had been worried about for so long would come, and I would realize that I was able to work through it. And that would give me the courage to do the next exposure and the next exposure. But definitely in the beginning, there were a lot of times where I thought to myself, I've been living this way for 32 years. Maybe I can just keep living this way, because exposure therapy is scary. I admire everyone, literally everyone in the OCD community who's doing exposure therapy. They're my heroes. Like, I admire them so much because it's the scariest thing. And I think that's what I wish I could just project to the world is help people understand like the recovery from this disorder can be the scariest thing you've ever done. But then you start to see like the glimmers of light and hope and like your life changing. And that's what makes it so you can do the next hard thing and the next hard thing.
Love it. That was beautiful.
Sounds excellent. Yeah.
Yeah. Is there anything like that we didn't ask that you think would be helpful for people to know, or something to share about yourself that we didn't get to?
I don't know. Let me look at my paper. I don't know. I think I got to share a lot of what I had hoped. I love what you're doing. I think that just talking about the courage that it takes to fight this disorder is a really great thing. People with OCD have to show so much courage.
Yeah.
I think a big thing is that stands out for me is you think OCD is one thing, and it has so many variables and like ins and outs and twists and turns. And that's one thing that I want for people is to not compare their journey to anyone else's journey. I did that a lot at the beginning. Like he's doing so well. Why don't they struggle with this? Why do I have this OCD and not that one? Like that one seems.
Yeah, that's that you hear that a lot. Like, I wish I had that OCD. I could deal with that.
Yes. But I know if I had that OCD, I would wish I had a different one, because no matter what theme I'm going through at the time, it's all miserable and hard. And so I guess that's one thing. It's just your journey is your journey, and just accept that that's the OCD that you have. You don't want anyone else's, and you can get through it regardless of what twists and turns it takes you on.
That's amazing. And I think that's a great place to end it. Is there any way, if like someone wanted to check out your material? You said you are at KJ OCD Recovery, and that's on Instagram?
Yep. Yeah, it's on Instagram.
All right. Awesome. So I hope people will check you out. It sounds like you have an awesome message to spread, and I'm so glad that we were able to make this happen.
Yeah, this was great. Thank you so much.
All right. Wonderful. So take care. Have a great one.
Okay. Bye. Bye, Annie.
Bye. Bye.